Rick Ross just cracked open the vault, and what tumbled out has the entire internet losing its collective mind. Jets bigger than starter homes, motorcycles priced like beachfront property, a private aircraft interior wired with a 7-figure internet system, and a hangar so obscene that even the seasoned wealth watchers in Rick Ross's comment section are quietly asking whether any of this can possibly be as real as Rick Ross wants the world to believe. But before the applause could even settle, 50 Cent slid into the frame like a hitman with a receipt book, and suddenly the entire spectacle stopped feeling like a victory lap and started smelling like something Rick Ross may deeply regret filming. Because 50 Cent has been waiting for this exact moment for years. And this time, 50 Cent is not letting Rick Ross walk away clean. Not this time. Not after this album. Not after these ticket numbers. Not after this Hangar tour handed 50 Cent the loudest microphone he has held in a decade. The footage that lit the fuse dropped on Complex, where Rick Ross gave a walkthrough of what he calls the Eagle's Nest. A Miami hangar so packed with luxury it looks less like a garage and more like a private museum built to convince the world that Rick Ross has officially outrun the past. There are custom motorcycles inspired by his Port of Miami era. There are collector cars with jet engines bolted into them. There are arcade machines lined up like childhood ghosts finally purchased in adulthood. Rick Ross said the collection is not about noise, not about applause, not about proving anything to anybody. Rick Ross said it is about peace, about quiet time, about a grown man returning to the toys the little boy inside him could never afford. It was, on the surface glance, one of the most humanizing wealth tours a rapper has ever given on camera in the modern streaming era. And then 50 Cent opened his phone. Because the second the internet started praising Rick Ross for the Hangar reveal, 50 Cent began doing what only 50 Cent does. Surgically dismantling the entire performance with the cold precision of a man who has been sharpening this blade since the year 2008. 50 Cent posted the chart numbers for Rick Ross's latest album, set it in stone, and let the digits do the punching. 22,000 copies. First week. From an artist Rick Ross swears is still operating at kingpin altitude. And 50 Cent did not stop there. He dragged up screenshots of a Rick Ross concert ticket map with entire sections glowing green, untouched, unsold, unloved. He mocked the discount codes Rick Ross's team was apparently offering, joking that the boss might have to start hawking chicken wings between verses just to keep the tour bus fueled. And the internet, being the internet, feasted on every single frame of it. But here is where the wheels really came off. 50 Cent did not simply attack Rick Ross's music. 50 Cent attacked the entire Kingpin persona. He questioned whether the jets in the hangar are truly owned or occasionally leased. He resurfaced rumors that Rick Ross rents out portions of his real estate empire on Airbnb between photo shoots. He implied, without saying it outright, that everything Rick Ross parks under the spotlight might be a costume, not a closet. And that accusation, whether provable or not, has now embedded itself into the conversation like a splinter no amount of stunting can pull out. Because once the internet plants a suspicion, that suspicion grows roots. And 50 Cent knows exactly how to water it. Rick Ross, of course, is doing what Rick Ross always does when the noise gets loud. Rick Ross is filming more. More jets. More cars. More motorcycles. More cigar-clouded interviews inside the hangar where Rick Ross casually mentioned that Jeff Bezos parks his aircraft next door and that the internet system inside his personal jet cost roughly $700,000 because streaming a phone call at 40,000 feet apparently demands billionaire-tier bandwidth. Rick Ross even confessed that he bought one motorcycle in 60 seconds flat because he saw it in a magazine and refused to negotiate. A story that either paints Rick Ross as impulsive royalty or as a man performing impulsivity for a camera crew that came expecting exactly that. And this is the trap 50 Cent has been building for over a decade. Because 50 Cent understands something about Rick Ross that most rap fans miss. 50 Cent understands that the moment Rick Ross's music stops selling, the entire visual empire, the boats, the mansions, the diamond-wrapped bikes, the vintage supercars, starts looking less like proof and more like production design. And 50 Cent has spent years quietly waiting for the sales curve to dip. Now it has. 22,000 copies. In an era where the mid-tier of hip-hop routinely clears 50. And 50 Cent, sensing blood in the water, has already moved past the album and started drilling into every corner of Rick Ross's public life that could possibly crack under pressure. Every deal. Every claim. Every posted photograph. Every whispered rumor Rick Ross has spent a decade denying now becomes fresh ammunition in 50 Cent's ongoing campaign. 50 Cent mocked Rick Ross for allegedly cutting his own grass at his mansion, asking why a self-declared billionaire would ever be caught behind a lawnmower. 50 Cent resurfaced old footage. 50 Cent posted meme after meme after meme. And when Rick Ross fired back by saying he is currently in the studio with Eminem and a posthumous Tupac feature, 50 Cent laughed on camera and reminded the internet that Tupac has been dead for 30 years and that Eminem has not exactly been eager to collaborate with Rick Ross at any point in the last 2 decades. The line landed like a body shot to the ribs of a fighter already gasping for air. Then came the historical callback that made every hip-hop fan sit straight up. Because you cannot talk about 50 Cent versus Rick Ross without dragging the ghost of the old Badge and Bars storm into the room. That is the wound that never healed. The correctional officer photograph. The chapter Rick Ross has spent his entire career trying to bury under stacks of $100 bills and cinematic music videos and champagne-soaked yacht footage. And 50 Cent, sensing that the current moment has finally softened Rick Ross's armor, is quietly hinting at it again. 50 Cent reminded interviewers that Rick Ross raps about drug empires, while carrying a documented history that includes none of those receipts. And in a genre where authenticity is currency, that reminder is worth more than any diss track 50 Cent could ever record. Meanwhile, Rick Ross keeps refusing to sit down. Rick Ross keeps refusing to acknowledge the attacks head-on. Instead, Rick Ross has adopted a strategy that some fans are calling brilliant and others are calling desperate. Rick Ross simply films more luxury. Rows of cars. Rows of bikes. Rows of games. Rows of collectibles. It is as if Rick Ross believes that if he flashes enough glass and chrome, the numbers behind the album will disappear into the noise. But 50 Cent is not letting the noise win. 50 Cent is louder. 50 Cent is sharper. And 50 Cent is playing to an audience that has grown increasingly skeptical of every wealth video that flashes across their feed. And here is where the whole feud starts landing with a different weight than it did back in 2009. Back then, 50 Cent was the reigning champion and Rick Ross was the ambitious underdog trying to punch up. The narrative had gravity. The audience had a rooting interest. But now, in 2026, the roles feel scrambled. 50 Cent is a Hollywood executive, a stars mogul, a liquor tycoon, and a producer whose television empire dwarfs his rap catalog. Rick Ross, meanwhile, is a legacy artist whose most recent album may go down as the lowest-selling first-week performance of his entire career. And when a Hollywood billionaire starts openly mocking a rapper's sales, the optics shift in ways that no amount of Hangar footage can reverse. Rick Ross tried to counter by extending what he called a peace offering. Rick Ross said on camera that he would sit down with 50 Cent, that Rick Ross would even entertain a business partnership, that Rick Ross would consider investing in 50 Cent's film studio in Shreveport, Louisiana. It was framed as generosity. But 50 Cent flipped it in real time. 50 Cent accused Rick Ross of borrowing money from investors around Shreveport and never returning it. 50 Cent accused Rick Ross of using the peace offering narrative as a public relations shield. 50 Cent accused Rick Ross of pretending to be a mogul while operating like a middleman. Every olive branch Rick Ross extended, 50 Cent snapped in half and threw back with a caption underneath. And the internet, sensing that this is no longer a two-sided argument, has picked a side. Comment sections underneath every Rick Ross post are now filled with skeptics. Fans are asking why Rick Ross keeps re-uploading the same Hangar footage. Fans are asking why the concert tickets are still available on the day of the show. Fans are asking why Rick Ross needs to remind everyone over and over that he is a boss. Because in the culture of hip-hop, the moment a rapper has to keep announcing his status, the audience automatically assumes the status is slipping. Rick Ross may be the wealthiest he has ever been. Rick Ross may be the most business-savvy he has ever been. Rick Ross may even be genuinely at peace inside that Miami hangar. But the perception war is being fought in real time, and 50 Cent is winning it by a country mile. Then came the Drake wrinkle. Because of course there is a Drake wrinkle. Rick Ross recently called Drake's latest album Iceman horrendous, a critique that some fans read as artistic honesty and others read as bitter self-projection. Because if there is one artist who has consistently outsold, outstreamed, and outmarketed Rick Ross for the last decade, it is Drake. And 50 Cent, ever the opportunist, seized the moment to remind Rick Ross that dissing the biggest streaming artist alive while releasing a 22,000-unit album may not be the strongest position from which to throw stones. The line has already gone viral. Rick Ross has not publicly responded to it. And every hour that passes without a rebuttal is another hour 50 Cent gets to plant a flag on the narrative. Meanwhile, buried inside all of this chaos, Rick Ross keeps trying to steer the conversation back to the collection. Rick Ross wants viewers to see the vintage bikes. Rick Ross wants viewers to see the muscle car with the jet engine that Rick Ross has never actually driven because the horsepower is too dangerous. Rick Ross wants viewers to see the Wingstop money, the Bumba Rum empire, the real estate portfolio. Rick Ross wants the world to understand that he is not a rapper anymore. He is an entrepreneur who happens to rap. And in a different climate, that pivot might have worked. In 2020, in 2018, in 2015, that pivot did work beautifully. But right now, in this exact media moment, every entrepreneurial talking point Rick Ross tries to introduce lands squarely in the shadow of 50 Cent screenshots. The receipts are simply louder than the resume. There is also the question nobody in Rick Ross's camp seems willing to publicly address, the question of why Rick Ross has not released a musical response. Because in hip-hop, when a legend gets attacked publicly, the traditional counter is a diss record. Rick Ross has released none. Rick Ross has released Instagram flexes. Rick Ross has released Hangar tours. Rick Ross has released interviews. But the microphone, the one weapon that could actually shift the momentum, has remained silent. And that silence is being interpreted online as either wisdom or as weakness. There is no middle ground left in the culture. 50 Cent, sensing that silence, has now escalated to a new tactic, inviting Rick Ross onto podcasts, live streams, and public forums where the two could theoretically hash it out face to face. Rick Ross has declined every invitation. And with each decline, 50 Cent gains another opportunity to claim victory by default. It is a chess move disguised as an olive branch. And Rick Ross, for all his stated business acumen, keeps walking straight past the board without touching a single piece. The album, Set It in Stone, is at the center of all of this. Because had Set It in Stone opened at 50 or 60,000 units, Rick Ross would currently be untouchable. Rick Ross could have laughed at 50 Cent's shots. Rick Ross could have posted the Billboard chart and dropped the microphone on the floor. But the number came in at 22,000. And in a genre where numbers are the closest thing to truth, that figure has become a shield 50 Cent gets to swing at Rick Ross every single time the boss tries to flex. Even worse, industry insiders have begun whispering that a portion of that 22,000 may have been label-purchased inventory, a claim 50 Cent has repeated with theatrical glee, and one that Rick Ross has refused to directly deny. Then there is the tour situation, which has arguably become the most damaging visual in the entire storm. Because when concert seating maps leak to the internet with green dots blanketing the arena, the story writes itself. Rick Ross announced the tour with fanfare. Rick Ross promised sold-out arenas. Rick Ross promised the return of the boss on stage. And instead, the tour has become a slow-motion embarrassment that his own team is trying to spin with buy one get one half off ticket promotions. In an industry where perception is everything, a discounted arena tour from a self-proclaimed billionaire is exactly the kind of contradiction the algorithm rewards audiences for laughing at. 50 Cent, of course, is laughing loudest. And now, as this saga barrels toward whatever the next chapter looks like, the hip-hop world is stuck watching two icons operate from completely opposite playbooks. Rick Ross is playing defense through display, hoping that if he shows enough wealth, the sales, the tickets, the Airbnb rumors, and the correctional officer whispers will all fade into background static. 50 Cent is playing offense through evidence, hoping that if he drops enough receipts, Rick Ross's entire kingpin persona will collapse under the weight of its own performance. Both men are wealthy. Both men are successful. Both men have carved permanent chapters into the culture. But only one of them is currently controlling the narrative. And it is not the one filming inside the hangar. Rick Ross may still recover. Rick Ross has recovered before. Rick Ross has survived heart attack-adjacent health scares, industry rivalries, personal lawsuits, and a career-defining exposure moment that would have ended most rappers a decade sooner. Rick Ross is a survivor. But survival and dominance are two very different animals. And the version of Rick Ross that ruled the 2010s, the version that could outflex, outrecord, and outbrand any competitor in the room, is currently being publicly outmaneuvered by a Hollywood mogul armed with a smartphone and a grudge. The question hovering over every hip-hop conversation right now is simple. Is Rick Ross genuinely thriving and merely bothered by the noise? Or is Rick Ross performing wealth to camouflage a career that is quietly slipping from underneath him? Granted, chart wins and bank statements live in different worlds. A bad album does not automatically mean an empty vault. But the coincidence of the timing, the desperation of the tour ticket discounts, the resurfacing of old wounds, and the refusal to respond musically are painting a picture that even Rick Ross's most loyal fans are having a very hard time defending in the comment sections. And 50 Cent knows it. That is why 50 Cent has not slowed down. That is why every 24 hours brings a new post, a new mockery, a new receipt, a new podcast clip. 50 Cent has entered what his fans call feasting mode, the state where 50 Cent has locked onto a target and refuses to release his grip until the culture agrees with him. 50 Cent did it to Ja Rule. 50 Cent did it to Diddy. And now, whether Rick Ross wants to accept it or not, Rick Ross is next on that same list. There is also a growing sense within the industry that this feud may be the defining hip-hop rivalry of 2026, not because it is the most artistically compelling, but because it is the most economically revealing. When 50 Cent attacks Rick Ross, 50 Cent is not attacking a rapper. 50 Cent is attacking a brand. 50 Cent is attacking a business model. 50 Cent is attacking the entire architecture of luxury flex hip-hop content and forcing the audience to ask a question the genre has spent a decade avoiding. If the streams are down, if the tickets are unsold, if the album is flopping, if the peers are laughing, what exactly is being flexed? What exactly is being celebrated? What exactly is being proven? Rick Ross has not answered that question. And every day Rick Ross does not answer, the question grows louder. The Hangar footage keeps circulating. The 50 Cent posts keep multiplying. The comment sections keep tilting. And the culture keeps waiting for the moment Rick Ross either walks into a studio and drops a career-saving diss record, or walks into a boardroom and quietly pivots into full retirement as an entrepreneur. Either move could work. But standing still, filming jets, and hoping 50 Cent runs out of energy is a strategy that has never once worked in the entire recorded history of hip-hop rivalries. Because 50 Cent does not run out of energy. 50 Cent runs out of targets. And Rick Ross, for better or worse, has just been promoted to the top of that list. There is another wrinkle worth mentioning, and it is one the mainstream press has not yet caught. Because inside the Hangar interview, Rick Ross casually name-dropped a handful of billionaires and celebrities he claims to move alongside, a moment that was intended to reinforce the boss image, but which 50 Cent immediately weaponized. 50 Cent pointed out that name-dropping billionaires is not the same as being one, and that if Rick Ross really operated inside those circles, the album would have moved 2,200,000 copies instead of 22,000. It was a clean, precise cut. And it landed exactly where 50 Cent wanted it to land, in the middle of every hip-hop timeline for 48 straight hours. Then Rick Ross made another move that raised eyebrows. Rick Ross began quietly reposting older tour footage, older wealth clips, older interviews from years when the numbers were undeniable. Fans immediately noticed. The internet, always alert to a rewrite, called it a subtle admission that the current moment was not producing enough evidence to defend the current claim. 50 Cent, predictably, took a screenshot of that too. And once again, the meme cycle turned in 50 Cent's favor. Even the Wingstop conversation has become a strange subplot. Because Rick Ross has long pointed to his Wingstop franchise ownership as proof of long-term business genius. But 50 Cent, doing what 50 Cent does, dug into public filings and industry reports and began questioning whether the Wingstop empire is as vast as Rick Ross has publicly described. 50 Cent did not accuse Rick Ross of lying. 50 Cent simply asked questions. And in the modern algorithmic environment, a well-placed question is often more damaging than a direct accusation. Rick Ross has not responded to that either. Meanwhile, in the middle of all this mess, the culture is watching Rick Ross's inner circle for signs of pressure. Because when a boss is truly untouchable, the inner circle stays quiet. But when the boss is under attack and vulnerable, the inner circle usually starts speaking up in support. So far, Rick Ross's camp has remained mostly silent. Only a handful of loyalists have posted. And their posts have been notably careful, notably brief, notably lacking in the kind of ferocious loyalty defense that usually accompanies a legend under fire. 50 Cent noticed that too. And 50 Cent, being 50 Cent, screenshotted the silence. Then the podcast circuit lit up. Every major hip-hop podcast picked up the story. Every commentator weighed in. Some defended Rick Ross. Some sided with 50 Cent. But the overwhelming consensus was that Rick Ross is currently in the weakest public position of his entire career, and that if Rick Ross does not respond with music and respond soon, the damage to the boss image may become permanent. That consensus alone is enough to force a response. Whether Rick Ross has one prepared remains the biggest open question in the culture. And behind all of this, the algorithm keeps rewarding 50 Cent. Because the algorithm loves conflict. The algorithm loves receipts. The algorithm loves numbers. And 50 Cent has weaponized all three. Every clip 50 Cent posts about Rick Ross gains millions of views within hours. Every meme spreads across platforms. Every screenshot circulates. And every day, the gap between the two men's cultural momentum widens. So the question turns to the audience now, the same audience that has watched this rivalry evolve from mixtape-era shots to blockbuster boardroom warfare. Is Rick Ross still the boss, still the mogul, still the unbothered king filming from a private hangar while the culture rotates around him? Or is Rick Ross a legacy artist whose empire is quietly cracking at exactly the moment 50 Cent decided to press it? Sound off in the comments below. Tell the world where you stand. Because this beef is not slowing down. This beef is accelerating. And the next chapter, the one 50 Cent is already writing in real time, may be the loudest hip-hop conflict the genre sees all year. Do not miss it. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on the notification bell. And come right back for the next update, because the moment Rick Ross responds, and the moment 50 Cent counters, the culture will detonate all over again.